Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today, the big question is the First Order coming to Star Wars Legion? Due to a leak that came out of the website that AMG just launched yesterday, a lot of people have been thinking, did they leak the First Order? And also a Scum and Villainy faction for Star Wars Legion. We're going to talk about this today, what this really means, what it could mean, what it might mean, what I think it means. In short, I don't actually think the First Order is coming. I think it might have been an X-Wing problem where the factions got mixed up, but it might not have been. We're going to talk about the whole thing in today's video because I think there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to talk about. It's actually too much for just one video, but we're going to try and tackle what we can anyhow. So if you guys are new here to the channel, I'd love for you to stick around. We talk about Star Wars Legion. Again, like the video, subscribe, share the video, all that stuff down in the description below. Also, new giveaway starting right now for a $100 Amazon gift card that is going to run through Halloween. So you have time to enter to win that. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos, and I want to know your thoughts on the First Order coming to Star Wars Legion. Is it something that you'd be into? Is it something that you're opposed to? Is it something maybe you're in between, like maybe but not this soon, maybe like in a couple years? What are some of your thoughts on it? Let me know down in the comments. You can also join our Discord and keep the discussion going there. It's a great place to talk, share pictures, and do all of that cool stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about the First Order coming to Star Wars Legion and why everybody's talking about this. So yesterday, Atomic Mass Games updated their website. This is something that was a long time coming. They have been talking about it for ever since they basically got all the new games. And it kind of was done a while back where we had some updates to the website that actually had all the different games listed out by section, and they wanted to do it differently and better and make it look a little bit more professional and more permanent. And finally, it just happened. Long kind of over schedule, but better late than never. And so the new website is up right now. And if you head over to atomicmassgames.com, you will see the new website. It has different sections for different games. It's got Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars, all of the Star Wars games in the submenus. Has Armada, Legion, Shatterpoint, and X-Wing. They're alphabetized. So if you're wondering why, X-Wing's on the bottom and Armada's on top and things like that, it's just alphabetized. It's not like a priority thing. But those are all available at atomicmassgames.com. It's some eagle-eyed early testers found this beautiful screenshot taken from a mobile device that looks like you have the Star Wars Legion Galactic Empire. You can sort by faction. They have the Galactic Republic, the Rebel Alliance. They have and all of these factions, and then there's a Star Wars Legion Scum and Villainy, which is interesting. Like, is that like just meant to be like mercs that can be for anybody else, or is that meant to be a whole new faction because it's in the faction dropdown? But most interesting is the Star Wars Legion First Order entry that is present on this. Now, it was present. It's not there anymore. This was taken down and changed over. Scum and Villainy and First Order are no longer there. But this led to a lot of speculation. Is this one of these big things that they're going to be announcing at Mini Stravaganza? And honestly, I guess we'll find out next week if this is something that's going to happen. But there are arguments to say that it is going to happen, and there are arguments to say that it's not. So let's talk about some of the first reactions here. My initial reaction was, wow, they're adding the First Order. Well, wait a second. Where's the Resistance? If you're going to do the First Order, wouldn't you also do the Resistance? We have Shadow Collective down here. We don't have the Resistance. Now, I think that makes sense. I go back to an old podcast from our friends over at the Fifth Trooper. Jay Shalansky was talking about this, and I agree with him, and I've mentioned this multiple times, that I feel like the First Order actually is a faction that would fit quite well into Legion, but the Resistance maybe not so much, because they're primarily heroes. They primarily have like a navy. They have starfighters, right? So like they have Poe, and then they have the A-wings and the X-wings, and the fleet. They have this whole navy. They don't really have a standing army. So I don't know if the Resistance really belongs in Star Wars Legion. you can try. I mean, there's homebrew that's done it. You did have those sand skimmers or whatever from episode 8. So you have something that you could if you wanted to, but I don't think it would feel right. I don't think I'd be interested in the Resistance as a faction for Legion, but the First Order, absolutely. I think the Resistance would work better as a battle force with some mercs that represent some of our Resistance heroes that can work like kind of a rebel battle force and able to kind of interoperate with the Rebellion a little bit. I think that kind of works better. So when I first saw this, I'm like, well, they're doing the First Order first instead of just launching First Order versus Resistance. I'm sure there'll probably be some Resistance expansions and make it into a battle force also, and it could potentially work. But then you looking at it, the thing that kind of set me apart from that is the inclusion of the Scum and Villainy option there. I'm like, wait a second, Scum and Villainy doesn't typically have a standing army either. Maybe some specific things like the Shadow Collective. And the fact that the Shadow Collective is here and Scum and Villainy is here, like they're both separate entities, it just kind of leads me to think that this might have been like a typo, where someone might have put this list together and said, well, here's all the factions, and started with X-Wing, since X-Wing has all of the factions, and then kind of copy-pasted over to Legion, and then said, wait a second, Legion also has Shadow Collective. Maybe that should have been Resistance. Maybe they overwrote that one. Or maybe it was just an error. Or maybe they do have long-term plans to do this. Maybe it is coming. I don't know. But it looks a little bit more like they copied the X-Wing factions and then just changed this one for Shadow Collective because of the wording of Scum and Villainy. All of the Shadow Collective stuff would be in Scum and Villainy, and pretty much all the Scum and Villainy stuff, well, a lot of it might go into Shadow Collective, and those don't feel like they would be two separate factions. And in fact, is Shadow Collective even really a faction? It's his battle force. I think a lot of people kind of view it as a faction, and I think it's actually a good sign that Shadow Collective is on there, because maybe it allows a good repository of a place to a receptacle to receive new expansions. I think the Shadow Collective could definitely benefit from some new content, and so I'd love to see more Shadow Collective expansions. But I don't think we need necessarily a Scum and Villainy faction in Legion, and the fact that we would have something that big and also something that big leaked at the same time, those are both massive announcements for Legion, and I just don't see that really happening right now. So I feel like the real answer is it probably was a typo from X-Wing that they've corrected. Truth be told, we'll find out next week at Mini Stravaganza. If you guys haven't seen already, it is going to be next week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're going to get a bulk of the news on like Friday and Saturday. The Legion roadmap is going to be Saturday morning. I'm going to be doing watch parties for a lot of this. There's going to be Battle Force talk. There's going to be Shatterpoint talk. There's going to be Legion talk and Marvel Crisis Protocol talk. But I'll be covering the Legion and Shatterpoint stuff. We'll do watch parties for all of it. You can watch over on AMG's Twitch, and you can also watch on my watch party if you want to do that. So definitely a lot of options and a lot of great places to talk about the things that we're excited about and get all excited and all of that cool stuff. So let's talk about the First Order in Star Wars Legion, because if they did actually do the First Order, I feel like it totally fits. I think it really works well for Legion. All right, you have lots of named characters, so I think your heroes are kind of covered. Now, in addition to just some of the characters that we see in the films, you also have the show Star Wars Resistance. There are more named characters. Gold armored like Commander Pyre, like basically the golden version of Captain Phasma also. Of course, you got General Hux, who's a leader. You got Kylo Ren, who's a leader. You got Phasma, could be a commander, right? Could also be an operative. But I figure you got Commander. Maybe Phasma kind of does sort of the Iden Versio thing where she can go in as an operative, but she's also kind of can be a commander. I'm not 100% sure about that. I feel like there's a little bit of a lack of operatives, but that's where the Knights of Ren come in. I feel like the Knights of Ren could be like a group operative, and I think we could, however they decide to implement like Clone Force 99, aka the Bad Batch, However that ends up working, that's a great way to also do like the Knights of Ren. I think that also works really well with these guys. Now, as it comes to all of the other stuff, you've got pretty much everything the Empire has, but new versions of it. You've got your walkers, your ATST kind of equivalent that the First Order has. You've got lots of different First Order troopers. Just episode 7 alone gave us so many different types of troopers. You have a lot of depth there. Plus you have generic officers, lots of those. And I feel like and you've also got Snoke you can do too. So I really feel like you do have quite a bit as far as options goes. And you also have Hondo. And I feel like Hondo could probably work just about everywhere. I think Hondo Anaka works regardless of faction. I think he kind of works for everybody, you know. But this also makes me think, if they add any other factions right now, are they going to have to change all of those bounty hunters? Would the Pikes work? Would the Pikes have to be errated? You know, would all of the bounty hunter stuff like work or have to change? You know, there's definitely a lot more questions available with all of this. But I mean, dude, I want to see like the First Order with the riot control baton, you know, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. You've got all kinds of flame troopers, big heavy weapon type stuff. Very, very cool stuff. So I kind of like what's going on with the idea of having the First Order, but I also think that with the prospect of, you know, like the Star Wars shows kind of painting the way for the First Order, you know, slowly and over time, and also another movie about the future Jedi Order that Rey is, you know, leading up to and stuff like that, with another movie kind of in coming years, it might be a good idea to just hold off a little bit and like let's flush out the First Order a little bit more beyond just the 3 movies and the 2 seasons of Star Wars Resistance. I think there's definitely a lot of other options, you know, that will show up and give us a little more depth, because there's still a lot of mystery around the First Order, I feel like. And I think a lot of that's going to get flushed out and give us a more... I would just hate to rush a First Order faction for a game, and then we find out more about them tactically that might make the faction seem kind of silly later on, you know. So that's my thoughts on how the First Order might work. Also, Scum and Villainy. If Scum and Villainy actually ends up being a faction for Star Wars Legion, how do you think that would go? I feel like the Hutt Cartel would work, but then wouldn't they just call it the Hutt Cartel? Is it possible that they're looking at kind of a faction that just accepts everybody, even whether you're mercenary or not? It could be an all-new faction as well. I feel like that's so unlikely, though, because I feel like that flies counter to the way that Legion has been building itself over the past 2 years or so. I feel like, you know, between the sub-factions, or rather the battle forces, mercs, and all of the special rules we've had for there, I just don't see AMG releasing 2 all-new factions. I definitely... and I don't see a battle force being called just Scum and Villainy either. So and if they do Scum and Villainy and the First Order, there's also stands to reason that Resistance would have to come at least as a battle force also. I feel like that's just way too much stuff. That's kind of the equivalent of launching a whole nother game. To make 3 kind of all new factions for a game, that's a lot. 1 new faction is a big order, because you have to sort of compete with like everything the Rebels and the Empire kind of have. You have to give them a lot of depth. And the Clone Wars factions aren't even caught up to that yet, but they're starting to get there. Shadow Collective is probably one of the biggest places that actually needs work, and the other factions could use some work, especially with the Republic, and where it comes to extra battle forces. Now, my money is on the fact that maybe this is a mistake, and what we're actually going to get is Gungans. That's my bet, man. My big bet is that we're not going to see the First Order for Star Wars Legion. I think we're going to see Gungans, but I've been wrong about Gungans many times in the past. Will this time also prove me wrong? We'll see. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. That is going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys, super rock stars. And I want to thank you so much for your continued support. Make the Force be with you. Did I say make the Force be with you? Force the Force to be with you. Always be the Force. Always be with you. And force you with the B. And